Well, hello and welcome to episode 12 of Being High with Dualistic Unity. This episode is brought to you by our friends at High Seltzer. High Seltzer is an all-natural Delta 8 infused drink for anyone over 21. Zero calories, zero sugar, zero alcohol. It's happy without the hangover. High Seltzer comes in 5 refreshing flavors: watermelon, pineapple, real cherry, wild berry, and lemon lime with only 5 milligrams of Delta 8 THC. It's a perfect alternative for someone seeking a functional beverage without any alcohol. High Seltzer is available in 23 states and more than 3,000 locations, and of course, always available online at www.highseltzers.com. That is High Seltzers plural with an S. Look for them on social media at High Seltzers and stay tuned for the CEO of High Seltzer, Lou Police, who is joining us today for a discussion about being high. And today's episode is with Lou Police. He is the co-founder and CEO of the High Collection, one brand of that being High Seltzer. Lou has worked in a number of industries from sales to TV to CBD, and now he's in cannabis. He has a plethora of knowledge and understanding of the industry and just an all-around fun guy to talk to. And this is a blast of a conversation.
Yeah, I was really surprised by how fun this conversation was because it's always kind of, a grab bag in terms of who's going to come onto the show. And we've never talked to them before most of the time. So it's a question of whether or not they're going to come to the show with an intent or just to come to the show and hang out with us. And this was very much a perfect example of just coming to the show and hanging out with us. And I will admit that I was so high that I often looked at his name on the screen as Leo. And I know it's not Leo. I reminded myself numerous times it wasn't Leo, but I kept seeing Leo. It is Lou, and Lou was awesome, and you're going to very much enjoy this episode. Dig in. Well, this is as good a place to start as any. Lou, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, Lou is going to tell us a little bit about himself and High Seltzer and a little bit about High Gummies, because I'm curious about how this all came about, specifically your origin story. I love the fact that this came about through a random conversation. Is that correct?
Well, don't some of the coolest things come about from random conversations? Thanks for the introduction, guys. I'm really happy to be here. Big fan. What is it? Long time listener, first time caller. So that's what's up. Yeah. So our brand is called the High Collection, and if you extrapolate THC, so that's our company, the High Collection THC, and we started it back in 2021. And, I've been in the CBD space and the cannabis space for many, many years, since 2017. And, we did the nutraceuticals that went over really well. And then you start to notice the proliferation of, the deltas and all that type of thing, especially pursuant to the 2018 Farm Bill. And so we started to really investigate what that would look like and what the regulatory compliance landscape looked like. And so, for kicks, we did edibles. And one of the unique things about our product is it incorporates a very specific proprietary water-based nano-emulsified delta. So it dissolves odorless and tasteless in water. Now that was the nerdy version. Do you want the not nerdy version?
But
There's no
only for the listeners' sake.
I mean, yeah, I gotta dilute it for myself. It's basically when you take a cannabinoid and you want to incorporate it into a food or a beverage, most use oil as an emulsifier. Our product is water-based, so it dissolves odorless and tasteless instantly in water. So that's what's really unique about the drink, and we can talk about that when you guys are ready. But we started with the gummies. It was a really low barrier to entry. And they went off like a rocket, like a bottle rocket. And so we thought, okay, we're on to something. And it was called High Gummy. And then we started seeing, okay, people they dig to edibles, and beverage was starting to emerge. And so we took the same sort of tech and we put it with water, and then we added natural organic flavor, which is extracted actually about 2 weeks before it goes in the holding tank. So this isn't stuff you're buying off like the shelf at a wholesale flavor house. Our flavors are extracted 14 days before they go into the holding tank. So to that end, you get that really fresh, crisp, refreshing sort of a flavor. And so there's no sugar, no calories, no alcohol, no carbs. And then I say at the end of that, no regret, right? So you've got this drink that's 0 cal, zero sugar, zero alcohol. And it's only 5 milligrams in the can, which, there's a demographic for that. If you want to eat an edible or drink something and go to orbit, there are products for that. But ours is what we refer to as a first touch. So people who maybe are not looking to drink alcohol, people who are slowing down their alcohol consumption, athletes, diabetics, anybody over 21 that's looking for what we refer to as a functional beverage. We want to be that first touch. So you can try it, have a good experience, and potentially, incorporate it into your lifestyle.
Wow, that's fascinating, and I think there's a lot to the difference just between the drinks and the gummies too, even, and just people's sense of like, you know, being able to have some feeling of control as they go through it, being able to, have some idea, you drink something over an extended period of time, and it is a little more subtle in when it hits you, whereas a gummy, like it'll smack you pretty quick. So have you found like just the ability for people to ease in to it to be maybe indicative of the response from the drink side of it versus the gummy? And I'd love to hear a little more on top of that. Just
Okay, yeah, we'll go down the rabbit hole. So with edibles, it's called metabolization, right? So when you eat an edible, especially an oil-based edible, it takes a much longer for your body to metabolize that material. So it's going to go through what's referred to as first pass metabolism. So your stomach, then through your digestion, and eventually into your liver, and then eventually into your bloodstream. So a lot of people, some people have the experience where they eat an edible and they don't feel anything after 15 or 20 minutes, right? And then they pop another edible. And then they get ready for that, phone a friend because you're going for a ride kind of a thing. Because I wasn't patient enough to wait for that edible to begin to metabolize. With our drink, it actually is being shown to metabolize in about 5 to 7 minutes, so faster than booze. So when you go to a pub or a bar or a sporting event or wherever you are at the beach, at the pool, and you open a high seltzer instead of, like, I don't know, one of the other alcoholic brands, those RTDs, those ready to drink brands, you feel it. You begin to feel the effects of that 5 milligrams of water-based Delta 8, within under 10 minutes. And we'll go back to the gummies, but our drink is, we equate it to about 2 glasses of wine. So it's real subtle. So I say to people, have you ever had wine? If the answer is yes, how does it make you feel? Drinking one can is about drinking 1.5 to 2 glasses of wine. So people identify with that. They recognize, okay, now I understand what's going to happen. The edibles, we know people, and we can't make medical claims, right? I mean, I would never do that. We'd always point to the science, the pharmacokinetics that are being published, by different organizations. But, the edibles, we've seen people that have tried them and have struggled with PTSD, vets that are coming home with issues, or even anybody dealing with PTSD, people that deal with sleep issues, that are trying to get away from traditional type pharma products and things like that, that are turning to cannabis. And, in the United States, there's a reason that cannabis is legal now, either recreationally or medicinally in so many states. And, do the research, and I know your listeners have done it as well, is, you can't die from weed. There's no respiratory risk and there's no cardiac risk. I'm not a doctor, but I know doctors. We have doctors on staff, MD, PharmD, PhD, and that's the reality of the situation. Now, you might eat too many edibles and you might go into orbit for way longer than you expected, but you won't die. And so a lot of people are looking for something that suggests, hey, listen, I have these different things. I want to try something that's, more holistic, more natural, more, and I think what some of these brands, and there's some really great brands out there that are doing, is allowing people an alternative now to something that they might be, seeking. And so to that end, our gummies have been really widely received. We're super grateful. And then we turn around and try to, educate people. So our, the doctors in our back office, we're doing educational videos almost daily now to help people understand how this could potentially, benefit them and improve their lifestyle.
That's amazing. I love the fact that basically, because there are no additives to this, like, it just sounds like it's an incredibly clean experience.
Yeah,
People
thank you.
aren't going to come out the other side and go, Oh, well, obviously it was a bad experience because of, the sugar or the alcohol or anything like that. It's like, nope, it's just you. It's just you going through your shit. I
That's
absolutely love that. I think that's great because it really does land the responsibility squarely on you, but it just sounds like a really nice, clean experience in terms of the drink. Gummies are great, don't get me wrong, and they're a lot of fun, but the advent of these new drinkable cannabis solutions are it's incredible. Especially from somebody who went through prohibition, right? Who went through that entire era where it's like, nope, it's cannabis related, it's bad for you. And it's like while they're drinking a giant glass of wine, it's like, cannabis is terrible. Right. And,
yeah.
and so you're like, no, look, it's exactly the same. And it's almost like, have you ever seen the video where it's like, this is how to start a movement in under 3 minutes? And it's some dude just dancing in a field by himself, and then somebody else comes
That's
over.
usually me, but go ahead.
But that's it. That's exactly what you're doing. That's what the drink is, right? Like you're dancing in the field saying, hey, look, this is just as fucking normal as anybody else, but you're not doing that. So it seems weird, right? And then as soon as there's enough people doing it, people aren't even going to ask about it. And all the education that you're doing is eventually not even going to be necessary because everybody's just going to go, well, look, they're all doing it. And
Yeah.
while that's both wonderful, it's also kind of sad.
Well, there is that herd mentality. I hear what you're saying. I'm picking up on the subtle implication, and there is some of that. And with regard to our brand, there's so many things out there. You've seen it. Your listeners have seen it. There's the propagation of misinformation is so is almost overwhelming, and then it becomes blurry. And so for us, we want to say, look, let's just dumb this down for Lou's purposes. Let's make this an eighth grade conversation. It's just this and this and this. And this is how your expectation, let's make it real easy. This is how you should anticipate you're going to feel. People say, am I going to raid the fridge? Am I going to be able to function? And all these things. It's like, yes, it's okay. And you're right. I would submit to you probably in a few more years, this will become so mainstream that people will just, they'll begin to identify that this is what works for me. I like an edible, or I enjoy a drink instead of a traditional alcoholic cocktail and things like that. But guys, I'll tell you an anecdotal story about me. So if we'd have done this podcast about 6 months ago, I'd have been about 40 pounds heavier. I wouldn't have, you guys are healthy and young, but I wouldn't have even found my jawline. I decided to put my proverbial mouth where my money was, or my money where my mouth was, and stop drinking alcohol, just quit, and started drinking our product exclusively. I sleep better. I've dropped 37 pounds. I'm a better version of myself, those types of things. I'm a little more relaxed. I know I'm putting out a lot of energy. I apologize. It's been an intense day, but I hope that other people have that same experience. And we're starting to see it, whether it's with our brand or others. There is life after booze, and nothing against alcohol, for some people that works, but man, there is another lifestyle, that doesn't include alcohol. And our research is showing 17 to 20% of adults are looking for an alternative to alcohol at this point.
And the rest of them just don't know there is one.
And alternatives, it's not even like a little bit less shitty for you. It's like THC cannabis is healthy. It seems unhealthy for a certain mentality, a mentality that wants to take themselves very seriously, remain in control, remain certain about things. And, there's like this aversion to uncertainty. And so it's funny because with alcohol and like with that conversation, it's like we go so far as like you can drink enough that you're uncertain about everything and you black out, you just close your eyes to what's going
Yep.
on instead of with THC, it's like your eyes are you're more sensitive to what's going on in a lot of
Yep.
ways, and it's like almost this other end of the spectrum we don't even. And it's funny how cannabis gets the drug overlay, whereas alcohol doesn't even get that sort of overlay, despite everyone knowing it's really unhealthy. Of course, it's super unhealthy, but again, it's that herd mentality, right? And so it's fun, with companies like High Seltzer being a part, and High Gummy, and everything that you're working on, like being a part of that sort of shift in so many ways, and eventually that herd just transitioning because enough people are using it. and and it and because when we do look at it, it's like everything's showing us that this is actually healthy, and that's why there's a stigma. It's because if we actually looked at the data, like it wouldn't make much sense.
Well, and I think what you guys are doing, and there's others in the space that are communicating this and presenting this narrative. It's super valuable, and I know you know it, but I mean that's one of the reasons I was thrilled to be to be invited and be able to do this with you today, is because this is a message that needs to be shared with people in a manner that's easily absorbed. Right? Don't come at me with all this gateway stuff and all this THC and 5 milligrams and Delta 8 and Delta 9 and HHC and all the formulations and all the I don't want that. Just explain it to me about, I used to drink a lot of whiskey and beer, and I want to slow down in the afternoon, and I want to be social with my friends at the ball game. Is this something that will help me with that? And then you start talking about, potentially mitigating weight gain, reducing liver damage, all the different, known medically recognized side effects of traditional alcohol consumption and things like that. And it becomes a matter of, okay, this is not loose science. This is, everybody else has been talking about this for a very long time. And then people start to come around to it. And then the really brilliant part, which you guys are seeing, I'm sure, with the success of your podcast, is then they start telling their friends and they start having that conversation in a trusted environment with their friends and family. And it doesn't have to be about my brand. It can just be in general, and we're seeing that. And it's been really fun to watch, over the last couple of years.
And that's just, on the physical side of things. It's something that it's so interesting because often people will react to somebody who is a cannabis user in their space if they're not used to it. It's like, oh my God, they're doing this thing that's been illegal forever, so it's got to be bad for you. And they're all of their stigmas, all of their assumptions, all of their self-validation just comes right to the front. And so that person ends up feeling like, oh God, well, maybe I am doing something wrong. And suddenly they're worried about appearing high. They're worried about, and what's funny about that is when you're high, you don't want to pick a fight with anybody. It's like, what, you're worried about being a pacifist? It seems really weird. And so it's really entertaining to me when I see if that person just continues on, eventually everybody around them just becomes kind of cool with it. In
Yeah.
fact, their relationships with those people, like you were mentioning, going down to a game and not having a beer, but actually just drinking one of these seltzers
Yeah.
instead. Well, what's nice is that instead of you inevitably ending up in a conversation with your buddy where you're all slurring and you're pissed off and blah, 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 you're like, man, I've been feeling uncomfortable like this whole goddamn time. And I realize there's no reason for it. And your buddy's like, exactly. Isn't that funny? And the conversation changes. All of a sudden, we are growing together. It's just that we haven't made a sustained effort to modify our mentality. We just keep
Right.
trying to run from our shit.
Yep. Yep. Well, because that's what we were taught. And so I would submit to you guys, based on what you're doing, the platform that you have, the conversation, now is reaching people in their early 20s. It's reaching people in their 30s. And it will continue to evolve. And it becomes a matter of, I don't have the statistics, but I know a lot of people in law enforcement. And when you look at all the conditions that affect our community and stuff like that, I wonder, and I'm asking the question, I wonder how much of that can be traced back to, the abuse of various substances. I don't know how much of it goes back to weed or cannabis or THC in general, but I would submit it's a very low percentage versus hard drugs and alcohol. My friends casually and socially, or casually and anecdotally, who are in law enforcement, if they're involved in the circumstance that somebody who's maybe consumed some THC, it's super chill. But someone who's taken drugs or booze, it is not. And so I think this is just going to be, nothing ever happens fast. It's slow, and then it's in our lifetime. So I think it's going to be something that's going to happen over time. And everybody's going to look back and they're going to point to conversations like this and the things you're doing, and hopefully some of the things that we're doing. As a matter of just kind of opening everybody's eyes to the fact that this is not a gateway drug. Trust me, there's plenty of drugs out there. You could walk down the street and get anything you want. This is not that. This becomes an alternative for people who are seeking to have a healthier lifestyle, still, live their lives and be social. With all respect to present company, not be an asshole.
We're
Oh,
not assholes. You
seriously.
can say that kind of stuff.
I know you're not. You guys are super chill. I dig it, man.
Oh yeah, we're just baked most of the time. That's all. Having a good time. But yeah, it's what's the phrase? Something like slowly and then all at once. And I think we're seeing just so much of that sort of happening all at once, and all of these conversations sort of shifting the willingness to be a little bit more self-honest. And like I really do think that cannabis in a lot of ways, like Bob Marley said once, the herb shows you yourself. It didn't sound like me saying it. Obviously, it sounded a lot different, but he
You
said
won't do the
that.
impression? Oh, that's okay.
It's I don't know if I should. Impressions are not my game. I'll leave it at
Okay.
that. Anyway, how much there is this almost like aversion to be in ourselves, to want to just feel better about ourselves, to think about ourselves in a certain way. And I really do think, because I'm a relatively recent cannabis user, like I didn't avoided it for a long time because it made me uncomfortable, like because I wasn't really relaxed, and it was just kind of showing me points of where I wasn't relaxed, why I wasn't relaxed, and parts of myself that maybe I wasn't willing to accept. Like when I would get super high, like I'd have a tough time expressing myself, communicating things. I'd get more quiet in a lot of ways. And I have friends who do the same. They're like, oh, if I get too high, I could imagine, like getting on a podcast or something. And it's like that's them. And
Right.
so we're trying to like just feel better about ourselves, thinking about ourselves in a certain way. And then that's reflective in our environment. Like it's rare that a lot of the world is in physical reality. And I think cannabis kind of reminds us of that physical reality. And so it's really cool to see, especially because you guys are now, I think, either in a new liquor store or a grocery store. You had a recent deal with Specs in Texas, but in those areas, the people usually reach for that. It's becoming more and more convenient now. So I think that's a big benefit of the drink side of it, is it's like kind of like replacing something that's reflective of an archaic mentality in alcohol.
No, and I agree with you. And you guys are familiar, but maybe some of your listeners aren't. There's so many benefits to the, from as a result of this plant, from a textile perspective. You're talking about clothing, you're talking about I think I heard somebody talking about pet bedding. Did you guys know? I just learned this, that apparently the plant wicks water better than any other known material, naturally occurring material, which is probably why Patagonia came out with their hemp line, because it wicks water. That was news to me, digestion and all these different things. I mean, you don't just have to light it up and smoke it or drink it. There's other benefits to the community. They're making floors and they're building homes and clothes. Somebody gave me a beanie yesterday and I was like, wow, this is rad. I love it. And they're like, it's made from hemp. Like, see, that's what I'm talking about, and it's such a super, and all these different things. And I think pretty soon, guys, certainly in your generation, you're going to see that this just becomes mainstream. It just becomes no longer, right now, it's the topic of conversation and people are fascinated by it and they want to consume this information and they want to learn more. And that's super rad. But at the end of the day, it's going to become so mainstream down the road that, but then you guys will have the ability to look back and go, hey, we contributed to that, which I think is, admirable.
Right, it's exciting as hell, right? Like,
Hell yeah.
and to go back to what you were saying, it's not just like what we can do in terms of textiles and hemp plastic and hemp concrete and all this other stuff, but there's also the carbon sequestration factor. That's the fact that it will take soil that's toxic and it will replenish that goddamn soil. Like, it's just insane how much there is to this. That all said, I wanted to go to something that's on your website because I love this, and it's not something that you would ever, to my knowledge, encounter on a website about alcohol, because while they're selling it to you, they're almost hesitant to tell you what to do with it because you could do something stupid with it.
For
Instead,
sure.
on your website, you have a list of rituals. And I really enjoy the list because they're very basic. They're very basic. Like, they're very, very much like, just sink into this, you'll dig it. And I love that because that's just an understanding of the mentality that the plant puts you in. Like
Yeah.
the first one, it's like munchies and movies, mystery novel, stuff like that. So I want to know, how did that ritual list come about? Was this something that you're just like, all right, everyone, what do you like to do when you're high?
It's an excellent question. You're the first person, and I've done some press recently pursuant to what's been happening with our brand. You're the first person to bring it up. So thank you for bringing that up. That's super rad. And you know what we do, guys, is we're really big on that consumer engagement. I want to have the discussion. Our brand is the official THC beverage for the Professional Pickleball Association, or the PPA tour. So if you guys play pickleball, you'll see us out there. We're on tour with the PPA. And then you have people come up to me or us or whatever, our ambassadors, our team members, and they say the same thing. They ask the questions like, what am I supposed to do with this? And so there's all kinds of ideas, but then we flip that back on them and say, okay, explain to me, like, for example, I don't know, what's your Friday night routine? Oh, I'll play pickleball, I'll eat some food, I'll pound some whiskey, drink a few beers, pass out, and go to sleep. And I'm like, okay, but then you wake up, let me guess, about 3 a.m. And they're like, yeah, how'd you know that? I was like, well, because all that sugar, or all that alcohol metabolized into sugar, it took about 4 hours. And what's sugar do to your body? Wakes you up. There you go. And then all of a sudden, it's like the light bulb went off and they're like, yes, that's me. And I'm like, all right, so here's how this might work. And then I'm like, try some, it doesn't have to be ours. Try a quality brand THC product in a low concentration and swap out that routine and tell me how it goes. Now I got an 81-year-old who reached out to us and said he changed that. And he said, now what I do is I have a meal, I have a couple high seltzers, maybe even a quarter of a gummy, if it's a Saturday night. And he's like, and I sleep like a bear. He's like, I sleep like a rock. And he said, and I haven't slept like that for hours or for years. And I'm like, that's super dope, man. Let's talk about it. Let's share that story with people. I can't publish that as any sort of medical claim, but that's an anecdotal story that you told me, so I'm going to share it with somebody else. And so yeah, all those things. You guys, I'll be sure to send you one. But we're doing something now that we're developing that is actually sort of a who's who or a how-to guide for creating mocktails with our beverage. And so one of the ways we did that was we just pulled the group. I'm looking at a big table. You can't see it, but we pulled the group and we started talking about different ideas. And then somebody had the concept. They're like, well, let's just put it out to our consumers, our customers. Hundreds and hundreds of recipes started coming back. So that's what we're going to do from now on. It's not about, a half a dozen or 15 people in a room in our company. It's about the consumer. Tell us about your story. Be part of this narrative. How is it part of your life, and how has it improved your life? Are you a better person? Are you sleeping better? I know people who are super creative and they're like, man, I start drinking a high seltzer around 3 p.m. I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah, I get my focus back. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. Tell me about that. And so what you guys are doing also allows people a platform to be able to share an experience that others can relate to. And I'm thank you for doing that.
Oh, happy to. And I just want to mention that the fifth ritual is probably my favorite. It's artwork without a deadline. It's like, just get into it. Whatever you're doing, just get into it. And there is so much value in being able to just sink into whatever you're doing. And that is not ever something that would ever go along with like, drink this beer and really focus. Like, I've never heard anything like that. And so I just love how indicative it is of a mentality shift.
Well, and I appreciate that. I'll take credit for that. I didn't do it. But guys, everybody recognizes, right? You only get one pass around in this life. Okay. And it's such a rat race. The more we try to slow down, the more it seems we're speeding up. And so what I've observed over the past few years is once people embrace what I call the slowdown, when you embrace the slowdown, you can't live without it, and that's what I'm like, hey, you don't have to slow way down. You just need to slow down and maybe, take a walk, read a book, do some painting or some drawing. See if that improves your overall mental clarity, makes you more productive at work, makes you a better spouse, a better parent, a better human. And I'm way older than you guys, probably twice your age, and it's taken me this long to figure that out. I'm grateful that I did, but I wish I'd have figured it out about 30 years ago.
Unless you're 88, you're definitely not twice raising.
All right, so we got a couple of
This guy,
40-year-olds. All right, well, I got you at least by 10 or 15 years, so you look great. I'm not hitting on you, but you look awesome.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. And as you're talking about the mocktails and everything, and just I mean, I can go on for I spent a lot of years drinking just as part of, college culture, post college, and just how much it was, that avoidance, that not wanting to look, and how, just reflective that is of everything going on in the world right now from those big shifts. But I was imagining bars where they serve just high seltzers, and that was all they did, and just the difference in feel and interactions and life, and like actually just actually living life in the fullness of that. Because for myself and my own experience with cannabis, I've, you know, dealt like all this deeper stuff of like anxiety, some paranoia, things like that. That'll come up, especially when I'm high, but I'm seeing it. It's there, and I'm like, yeah, this is a part of me too, and it's not an issue with that. And like, if those sorts of things were happening in bars instead of just like this noise, this distraction, this numbness to real. It's not even like when you're drunk, you're not even living really. It's like you get this facade of living because you can experience things without yourself, or feeling like yourself is in the way so much. So there's less hesitation, but there's less life. So, as you know, we've been speaking with Lou Poli, CEO at High Seltzer today, and you can check out High Seltzer online at www.highseltzers.com. High Seltzer is the all-natural, zero-calorie, zero-sugar, zero-alcohol beverage for 2024, formulated with just 5 milligrams of hemp-derived THC. It's all the happy without the hangover. Find High Seltzer online and use code SPRING for 20% off and free shipping. Note the following restrictions. Promo code is valid for new customers only, cannot be combined with other coupons, and has a max redemption value of $250. Now, back to the episode. Too. And so I'm curious what your experience with cannabis and possibly alcohol shifting to cannabis, or just what your experience kind of throughout your life and journey with cannabis has been like.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned anxiety and paranoia, and maybe your listeners are familiar with the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9, because our product is a Delta 8 product. And if you want to talk about it, we can. The reason I really couldn't afford weed when I was in college, but one of the other reasons was because I would have what's referred to as audible hallucinations, which is super trippy to be alone in a room and hear voices. Okay, there you go. You dig. You're like raising your hand, Ray. Like, this is something I look forward to, the voices. Do you? All right, that's what's up.
I do, yeah.
I feel you, man. For me, it wasn't the most pleasant experience. Maybe the voices were too angry. Maybe they were very judgmental, but I didn't like the voices. And so
It's the screaming that bothers me.
it's the screaming at you that bothers you, the
That
incessant.
where all of a sudden it's just like somebody's in the room and they're just like screaming at the top of their lungs. And you're just like,
And I'm
what
actually
the hell was that?
Yeah. So that was the reason I couldn't do traditional cannabis. Not for lack of trying, but it just wasn't something that I just, that paranoid and anxiety would come on. But then then you go to drinking, and alcohol is it's prevalent, it's everywhere, it's familiar. But I would agree with you. It has the same sort of effect. There's nothing new or different about it, right? You're going to drink so much and either just be miserable, hungover, dehydrated. Tomorrow's going to, be sucky. Or if you even then you get to the blackout category, which is super dangerous for anybody. And then we started doing this product, and I stopped. I wasn't a heavy drinker. Apparently 35 pounds worth of alcohol, which just fell off, which was awesome. But then you move to something else and you realize, yeah, I have my, I'm functioning, I'm relaxed, I'm having a conversation, I'm engaged in the conversation. I'm not, I know I'm not going to be put myself in a circumstance where I lose control or I black out or, all the other things. I've been a first responder, guys, for 25 years. So unfortunately, I've seen my share of what happens when people get behind the wheel of a car with, and when alcohol is involved. And it's a sobering circumstance. And so then I was like, well, I'm going to, now that I'm doing this, I'm going to walk the talk. And I feel fantastic. And I'm somebody now that can say, look, I didn't do it. Now I do. But, with our product, with the Delta 8 product, specifically because of the molecular structure and things like that, I don't have the paranoia and anxiety. So I can enjoy our product specifically and not hear those weird voices and stuff like that. And so that's been super enjoyable for me. And then of course all the benefits of not drinking alcohol anymore, So that's been my experience. And I think a lot of people have shared that. I mean, you guys were indicating earlier that cannabis wasn't something that was part of your lifestyle until later in life, and just you. Yeah. Well, so it's just, I mean, even my parents who allegedly never smoked weed. I mean, I don't know. They were, children of the 60s. So I'm having a hard time believing my dad never smoked weed. But I gave him some of our gummies, and he microdoses them now in the evening instead of taking, traditional melatonin or taking a heavier type of a pharmaceutical to sleep, and it works for him. So even that makes me feel good. And that way, when people come up to me like, "Is this safe?" I respond with, "I give it to my dad. I share it with my father. It's safe. You can try it. I wouldn't give it to my 80-year-old dad or give it to you if I wasn't willing to, eat it or drink it myself and share it with my, the people closest to me."
Absolutely. And I do want to get into a little bit of the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9 in a moment, but I do want to discuss what I was talking about earlier in terms of the audio hallucinations. Cannabis is very much like an extreme state of meditation. People don't look at it that way, but in meditation, you are very much aware of everything that's going on through your awareness. And so with cannabis use, it puts you back in that alpha state. But in that alpha state, a lot of things are connecting, a lot of past memories, a lot of things that you may not be aware of. And so you're going to see things, hear things, feel things, and have emotions that may not have an explanation. And so when you use cannabis, this is something to keep in mind, is that you may, in fact, experience things that sound very much like a psychedelic trip. And it's just because there's really not that much difference except the extreme state of relaxation. Right?
Sure. That's great. Well, and I think that's great advice, because instead of being afraid of it, embrace it. Embrace that, relax a little bit, embrace that. Don't panic. That state of relaxation, maybe it's because so many people function at such a high stress level. They're not used to slowing down, they're, and they don't know how to respond to their brain being like, all right, I'm not thinking about work. I'm not thinking about a deadline. I'm not thinking about a bill. I'm not thinking about next week. I'm not thinking about yesterday. I'm just here. How is this happening? And then if you just allow that to occur and realize you're going to be all right, this is just fine. Then, I think you're going to see a lot of people be, turn to this as an alternative to all the traditional stuff that they've been doing for generations.
Agreed. That said, though, it is nice to be able to move through the spectrum with a certain degree of recognition of your limitations. This is something that when I was a kid, it was just like, here's some weed. It's like, how strong is this shit? It's like, just smoke it. All right, I'll do that. Same with mushrooms. When I discovered microdosing, like a decade after I stopped using mushrooms, I was like, oh, you're measuring it in what, milligrams? That's adorable. Like it just never occurred to you at the time, right? But you recognize why, because that giant plunge off the cliff into relaxation can be really jarring when, as you said, you're so used to being in control, or at least feeling like you're in control. And so I
Sure.
love the fact that what you're offering with this Delta 8 solution is, as it says on your website, kind of a toned down version, something that you can walk your way towards that
Yep.
area of your consciousness. And when you're ready to leap, go ahead. But it's the recognition that it's on your own terms. And I absolutely love that.
I think that's thank you. And I think that's applicable to anything that we want to, take on as a matter of lifestyle. Nothing, with limited exception, you don't want to dive headfirst into anything. And so I'm grateful for the compliment. And that's why we really want to become, if not already, that first touch trusted, option. And then, yes, you can all, just like our parents and our grandparents told us, you can always do more, you know, a little bit, and then you can do more and those types of things. And, you know, arguably there's some brands out there that, you know, will help you do more. I mean, they'll take you to Saturn if you want to go. But that's just not our brand. And back to your comment, about psilocybin and things like that. I think you're going to see some really interesting science start to evolve. They're already doing the studies both overseas and here in the United States, and you know, up north as well. I think opening up that consciousness is really, really valuable, because you're taking that power back. And people are like, what do you mean taking it back? I always had the power. Did you? Did you always have it? You know, or was it in the bottle of was it the bottom of a whiskey bottle? You know, was it a 6-pack or a 12-pack in? You know, was it, you know, whatever the drug of choice is? Did you really have that power, or were you masquerading as though you were in control when maybe you weren't? And so again, I see this as I don't see this as a gateway to anything except expanding your mental clarity, relaxing a little bit, and well, just giving yourself a break. For crying out loud, give yourself a break, you know?
Seriously, cut yourself some slack. You're doing all
Yes.
right. You don't have to keep running for everyone else that are also running entirely focused on
Yeah.
themselves. It's like you're good as you are, but it's yeah, and just the impact, the potential impact of both psilocybin and cannabis being able to almost like work together in a sense, and like, you know, cannabis showing you, I don't know, at least in my experience, like cannabis has shown me more of myself in the sense of the dualistic perspective, and this goes to our, I don't know, podcast title a little bit, dualistic unity, and mushrooms being, you know, maybe a little bit more of the less personalized side, like seeing that end of the spectrum, that nothing is disconnected, and how informative they are of each other. And so it kind of makes sense if we don't want to see that. We don't want to see that, you know, there is some connection going on. It's going to be, we're going to both avoid ourselves and avoid that reality. And so I think that's where a lot of people's difficulty with cannabis comes from, is just not wanting to look at all the aspects of themselves that
Yes.
brings up, you know?
Yeah. I think that's actually more poignant. And I know you probably talk about this on a regular basis, but what you just said is on point. People are looking to other things to avoid themselves. And I have things I want to avoid, okay? And that I'm not, there's by no stretch there's anything perfect about me. But if you can be introspective, dare to improve, right? And sometimes, you know, some of these other products don't allow you the opportunity to be introspective. And I think that's super rad. I mean, your listeners can Google or whatever, you know, what do you call it, browser that they prefer, but they can go and research what's being done with, like, for example, psilocybin with veterans. I would encourage everyone listening to just do that. Just go read about that. If these people who put their lives on the line for their country and risked everything and came back with things, you know, you can escape a lot of things. What you can't escape is the voices in your head and the visions that you've seen. Again, guys, I've been a first responder. I've seen some stuff. It haunts you, okay? And there's hundreds of thousands and millions of people who've experienced things in their lives that haunt them. And the early research that I've been reading about with something like psilocybin, giving people their lives back, reconnecting those bridges. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but man, I am fascinated by that, and I want to be around to see what evolves from those types of things, because it's been here forever. It's finally taken some people with with some initiative to go to really dig into it and start looking into it. And the same applies to cannabis. We've just scratched the surface, and you guys know a lot more than I do about this plant and about this space and about about the potential usages and the benefits. But I suggest we've just scratched the surface on this thing. There's going to be so much more to come, and I'm excited to see it.
I agree with you. I think that it's not even just, the cannabis and the psilocybin, but it's actually, an extension of our mentality shifting of necessity. Like we witness every day the consequence of trying to be in control, of competing, of comparing, of stressing ourselves out with this fictitious story of how we're doing and what our value is and all that shit. And then all of a sudden we're face to face with all that suffering, and the only thing we can do is try to escape it. How do I shut this off for a little while? Oh, I'll tune into the TV, or I'll have a drink or something like that. Whereas cannabis, and to a greater extent psilocybin, or psychedelics as a whole, they just give you the time to process it until you can just reconcile it. You're like, this isn't personal. This is just shit I went through.
Yep.
I'm not defined by any of it, but you have to go through it. That's the whole thing, is you have to go through it in order to have that epiphany. And that's why they're so useful. But we're so used to just running away from whatever. It just feels shitty. I don't want to look at it. It's like, it's the only way you're going to get over it. It's the only way is to recognize why it feels shitty.
And by the way, whenever you emerge from, that binge drinking or whatever it is that you were turning to shut it off, guess what? It's still gonna be there, and that's the part that's, and by the way, that requires a certain level of maturity and being able to identify that, hey, I'm going to uncover some stuff, and you're either going to deal with it or you're going to suppress it. And that becomes an individual decision. But man, what an amazing world this would be if everybody realized that we're all going through the same shit, and just different variations of it, and it's okay, and I don't judge you for it. Gosh, what would a world like that look like? I'm probably going to miss that, but I sure will hope it turns out to be something really rad, where everybody just like, hey, I get it, man. You're going down a dark path. It's going to be okay. I went through that, and can I lend you some advice? I don't want anything in return. May I offer you some consolation? Can I be a receptive ear? Can I be a receptive listener? And I don't know, guys. As I get older, it becomes more a matter of embracing the experiences than having the stuff, and that's what I'm observing with the community that I'm around now, present company included, which is there's more to life than this or that, and giving people the ability to empower themselves is a massive responsibility. But I'm certainly grateful that that we get to be a tiny, tiny, tiny part of that.
Likewise. And I just want to say quickly before I pass it over to Andrew that, like you, I've been watching for a long time. Like I've been aware of the shift in mentality that was coming for over half my life. And you can get into this mentality like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see it, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop what I'm doing. And what we don't recognize is that we're actually the evidence that it's already happening. Like you're talking about, maybe not seeing that world shifting in your lifetime, and I'm on this end watching it shift through you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah. And it's fascinating how indicative, like, all of even just this conversation, like the ability to have this conversation of like, you know, it's okay. We don't have to judge each other what we're going through. And you start to see when you're more, because it's as you become more honest with yourself. And I think again, cannabis is something that helps show you that. It kind of forces you to see it. It's hard to hide things when you're really super baked, because you're just like, as you relax, it's like everything else comes up, but it's there. It's
Yeah.
there, whether you want to see it or not. And so it just makes you feel good. It makes me feel good to feel like it's not there, to be able to convince myself that it's not there. And cannabis is like, fuck that story. It's still there. It's in there, motherfucker. Here it is. Now you can do something with it. But now you can
Yes.
do something with it. But that avoidance, that lack of responsibility has been, we see it all over left and right. And I think alcohol was a massive just product of that, of just that suppression, that numbing, and cannabis is other end of the spectrum. And so it's yeah, it's exciting to see, but it'll be cool to see how that, you know,
So here's
really.
an interesting thing, a piece of information that someone shared with me recently. During the COVID pandemic, which affected everybody in so many different ways, you know, uh, liquor stores here where I stay were open 24/7 or 14 or 18 hours a day, right? Even when everything else was shutting down, when gyms were shutting down and nursery schools were shutting down and colleges were shutting down and businesses were shutting down. And I asked the question too late, but I still asked the question, which was, how was that? And they said it's an essential business, an essential product. Do you know why? Because so many people are, rely on alcohol that if they were to not be able to get it, the run on the healthcare system would have been overwhelming in addition to COVID. And it took me a minute and I sat there and I went, yeah, that makes sense. I understand. How sad is that?
I hear you, man. That's kind of funny though when you think about it. It's one of those very obvious things. We're like, oh, this might be indicative of a problem. This could be something that we could address. But again, like it's just the powers that be. It's the system that's been there forever. And it's so funny because it's always relied upon our ignorance. It's like cannabis is bad for you. How do you know? It's illegal. It's like, well, we'll do some testing on it. Well, we would, but it's illegal. So we can't do testing on it. So just trust us, and we went through that shit for years. And it was finally through loved ones, people who we loved and knew, who despite all the stigma just wouldn't stop growing or smoking or baking or whatever it is they were doing. They're like, no, this is obviously a good thing. And here we are at the crest of that wave.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's exciting, man.
It's super really exciting.
So
it's super exciting.
That said, I have a question for you because I know we're going to wrap up in the nearish future. How is it for you in terms of dealing with that stigma since you've gotten into the industry, since you've embraced what it is you're doing, as it were, and how important it is? Obviously, you have some remnants of other relationships in your life from before you were in the cannabis industry. How did those relationships work out over time? How was that integration period?
Like interpersonal relationships?
Correct.
Okay, so if I may, let's talk about High Seltzer and the High Collection as a brand and not about Lou, okay? Because as you guys well know, it's incredible people you might never meet that are involved with our organization, right? So we'll talk about the product or the company as a product, as a brand, as a movement. And then I'll certainly answer your question about the interpersonal relationships. First of all, it was scary, okay? I mean, even I have young children, and even one time a parent said to me, they asked one of my children, what's your dad do for a job? Response, you ready? He's a drug dealer. That's a tough one to overcome, guys, okay? When you're at the parent-teacher conference and they're like, your daughter said you're a drug dealer, you're like, okay, hold on. Rewind. That's not exactly true. And so our brand, I was mentioning earlier, and there are others in this space. This is going to take a minute, right? I mean, you guys have been around and involved in a while. You're familiar with the vernacular. You're familiar with the experience. You have friends and colleagues that have been through this. That's a small percentage of the population. The rest of the people, commensurate with what you said earlier, are like, wait, is this okay? Can I put my toe in the water? And that's who we want to be as a brand. And that's why I think, you mentioned Specs, and thank you for mentioning that in Texas. Our partnership with the Specs brand, which is 250 of their brick and mortar locations, and then 70% of all the on-premise locations in the state of Texas, which is like 50,000 bars and restaurants, was a massive testament to not only what we're doing, but, on behalf of Specs for being so visionary and recognizing this is coming. And of course we're sold in about 23 or 24 states and 4,000 locations across the country. And of course, online, blah, blah, blah. But what that means is, and I'm going to be in Houston in a couple of weeks, speaking to a group of industry experts. I am not an industry expert, okay? But I'm going to be speaking to all these industry experts in the beverage space about what's happening in with regard to NA and why people are seeking this out and what has happened with our brand and others. And part of that messaging is you got to you need to offer the community, the population, an opportunity to put their toe in the water, and if it's done properly. And by the way, guys, one of the things we haven't talked about, and, if there's time, I'm happy to, go into it more, is, you're talking about all this oversight and regulatory compliance and the farm bill, and the federal government, and then state and local municipalities that are all trying to figure this out, because the toothpaste is out of the tube. Okay. You can't put it back. So now it becomes a matter of how do we message? How do we build consumer confidence? How do we protect, people from brands who aren't doing it right? And there are some who are not doing it right, and allow the consumer to have a choice. And our brand is contributing to all that. We're contributing to language. We're making recommendations. We're testifying as subject matter experts in various capacities. We're implementing proper, medical compliance and testing and referencing existing studies and all these things, because once that all settles out, and some of these brands, that cream begins to rise to the top, then you build that consumer trust, you give people choices, and then subsequently they can turn around and make decisions for themselves. But the challenge becomes, what happens when these other brands get out there too fast or too prematurely, and then people have a bad experience. And so I think what you're doing contributes to that narrative. I think proper transparency is super important. And then again, to your question, my interpersonal relationships have been things, where people are like, wait, you're involved with that? How did you get involved with that? Because a lot of them know my background. And I'm like, you know what? It was an accident. And that's how we started this conversation. It was actually an accident. And one of the greatest accidents of my life, because it's one of those things now that has opened my eyes, opened these opportunities, conversations with people like you, and being able to engage with others who, shocker, have the same approach to life and all that stuff that I did. And they're like, oh, look what we have in common. And so all that to say, the stigma, I think, is quickly being washed away. And you're seeing, people like, I don't know, man, I'll drop Elon Musk. He doesn't make apologies for his cannabis consumption. He's a pretty smart dude, done some cool stuff. And now it becomes a matter of, okay, how can I apply this in my lifestyle, and peeling that away. So anyway, I didn't mean to be long-winded, but it's been sort of a fun experience. And I'm super proud of it, guys. I'm actually kind of nervous, if I'm being honest with you, with all the things that are happening. And, I've got a face for radio. So like I told you, being on a podcast with cameras on is a little off-putting for me. But at the same time, face your fears, right? And stand up and have a conversation. And if you don't like me, that's cool, I'll go on to the next. So I got a few people in my circles who still like me.
Oh, cheers to that, man. Cheers to that. I would love to hear a little bit more. You mentioned the start of the company and the accident and all of that. I would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick version. So we did the gummies, right? And they did really, really well. And then we formulated the drink. And this is where, I get to, tout on all my associates and our team members, is when we first ran the cans, we didn't know anything about making drinks. Okay. And we found some people that had a lot of experience, and we put those three ingredients, the Delta 8, the proprietary Delta 8 in a can. We put water, pasteurized in a can, and we put that natural flavor in a can. And they were in just silver aluminum cans, guys. There were no labels. We couldn't even afford like a laser printer to print paper labels. It was just a silver can. And so we started handing it out. So imagine being somebody, maybe you're friends, maybe you barely know me, and I hand you a can. I'm like, here, drink this. Be like, no. and people, we started sharing it. And then we did our first production run at the end of, towards the end of 2022, was 10,000 cans. And we only had one flavor. It was lemon lime. And it went off better than we could expect. And then we went to 50,000 cans a month. Then we went to 100,000 cans a month. Then we went to 500,000 cans a month. This month, we're doing 1.2 million cans a month. And the projection is to be up to almost 2 million cans a month by the end of this year. And I'm just sitting here scratching my head like, how did this happen? And, again, I'm going to give the credit to people on our team that are on the ground having conversations, our marketing team, people on our biz dev team, the website, the PhDs, MDs, PharmDs in our back office that are helping us, present this message and this narrative. All those things translates into something that people are willing to try. And then, like I said, specs with the conversations with specs and their trust in us, and then turning around and putting their what I call their machine to work. It's been pretty remarkable. I had the opportunity to talk to a lot of very influential people, do podcasts like this, and just share this message, which is we're one brand out there doing it. There are a lot of other brands that are going to do it right, and I think that'll translate into an industry. This is a massive industry, guys. I mean, when you look at the money, the financial components, the socioeconomic components, it's a massive opportunity for the country, for the states, for the individuals, for the businesses. And there's a huge supply chain that will benefit from this all the way to the farmer. And that needs to be addressed. They need to shine a white hot light on the economic impact of this across so many different facets of our society. And to that end, I think it's going to be really beneficial,
Agreed. And it's definitely something that I'm looking forward to. Like people don't necessarily recognize it, but there are a generation of people right now who are smoking weed without the fear and the anxiety and the judgment and everything else that we grew up with. And eventually they're going to be industry leaders. They're going to be politicians. They're going to change the system in a number of different ways. And that's just using cannabis recreationally or medicinally. There's also the hemp side. Like most of the world says cannabis is illegal. It's bad for you. But China, India, Africa, they're all going straight for hemp right now in a big, big way. It's why? Well, necessity. You can only run away from something that's so beneficial for so long. Like you can only be profit minded for so long before you start going, oh shit, things are falling apart. We should go back to what we know. And this
Yeah.
is something that we printed the first goddamn Bible on it.
Yeah, it's coming, fellas. I think it'll be super interesting, and I wasn't aware that so many of those different nations were embracing it at that level. But I think you're right. For so many reasons we don't have to bore your listeners with, but at the end of the day, there's enormous benefit, and we're super proud and excited to be part of that that dialogue and just be just a what do you call that, just a bookmark in that conversation. So. Thanks for the opportunity to share that with everybody.
Oh, thank you, Lou. This has been a lot of fun. I absolutely love hearing about not just fun brands that are doing a lot of cool things, but the people involved in it. And so I appreciate you sharing your story and digging into all sorts of stuff today. I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Before we do sign off, where can people find you, High Seltzer, anything you want to mention in between?
Oh, thanks. They can find us online. We have one of those store finders now wherever they are in the country to locate a retailer that's selling our product, and they can order online. Because it's water, we ship pretty much around the country with very limited exception. And it's highseltzers.com and highgummy.com. And I don't know, they can find me somewhere. I'm sure I'm out there somewhere. I try not to be too much, but again, guys, super grateful for the opportunity. I hope we stay connected, and congrats on all the success with the podcast. I mean, it's really super rad what you guys are doing and bringing this awareness to people and supporting what's happening, both locally and internationally with this space. So thanks for doing that.
We really appreciate you being here, Lou. And for me, because I don't live in the US, I'm going to be coming down there for a retreat in the very near future in California. So I will be picking up a High Seltzer because I got to try this shit out for myself. That's about it for today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.